sweet town. Little congested, and Garmin still needs to update which way one way is. Welcome to 10 Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Shane Patrick.
With me, as always, is Phil Freeman. Today, we're going to be talking to Patrick Verity about riding motorcycles in Peru and a few other things.
Let's get right to it, shall we? I started thinking after having been there for a month or so that Peru is a very steep country. And when you look at a map and it goes from point to point, you think, oh, that's not far. But Google doesn't take into account the thousands of feet that you need to drop and then, ascend. And Peru is basically in a constant state of landslide. So if you really think you're going to go somewhere, you need to think that you need a plan B to get there, just because some rocks may think that they need to take a travel that day. And that was a constant. There was plenty of road damage every day to indicate that there was a roadblock, at least at one point on that road.
Yeah, along with that steepness, a thing that's pretty fascinating is, as we'd start in a canyon, there were palm trees by the beach, and then mangoes and oranges and limes and apples, and all the way up till no vegetation because it's too cold for anything to grow except that little grass. But that's just all in one valley, 10 biospheres.
Yeah, what was it said? We started in Montana and we ended in the Sonora Desert for lunch, and then we went right back up to somewhere in the Rockies for by the time we checked into our hotel.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, you were already at the hating phase, and maybe we should take a side note and talk about how you leave a country happily. But we saw flamingos at 10,000 feet. I did. I mean, Patrick, You didn't because you were already.
You're going too fast.
I was focused. Holy shit.
Going too fast on that 500.
Yeah. I am bummed I missed that.
Well, that's actually another thing to think about or talk about is the 500s, those small bikes, really great for some of the really hard riding where you got to stand on your pegs, and you had the more maneuverable. You were loving it. And then where roads straightened out or got smoother, better, we were on the bike to be on, and you were, wringing its neck and just couldn't keep up or getting shook around because we had 3 more inches of travel and that sort of thing.
I think passing is where I really noticed it. Get it over with quickly with all the twisties there. And yeah, the CB500 took a little time, but it was a great bike. No complaints at all.
Trying to think of my favorite town on that trip, because we went to many, and I had a list of the places that we went. Forgive me if let me see. I've got it written down here.
Well, while you're looking for that list, I can tell you my favorite lunch spot was called Super Gordo.
Exactly what you're going to say. Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it. Do it.
Yeah, Super Gordo, which pretty sure means...
Let's talk about that for a second.
Super fat. And I don't remember if that was a Sunday, but that town square was quiet. Peru, like a lot of South America, you get funneled to the town square, the heart of the city, and you can figure out what you need from there. We got into the town square, and there was a little girl walking a sheep, and really nothing else happening in the square when we got there.
There was one guy that was there watching us the whole time. That was going on. There was a couple dogs. They seemed pretty friendly. There was one dog fight. That was about it. There was a hardware store, if I remember correctly.
Shane got some apples there. There's an apple place.
Yep.
We were to something like Huanca Velica or something, I want to say. And Super Gordo just kind of stood out as the restaurant. And what was it like when you walked in?
Well, it was rustic and homey It smelled good. It smelled good. It smelled clean. But, I remember looking down at my four legs of my chair and being concerned about, I've got to really pay attention to, like, one of the legs could go through a hole in this floor and I might get, not necessarily hurt, but I would get kind of twisted up if the chair leg went through the hole in the floor. Not that the floor was rotten, just that there were some gaps.
I also remember the head, and I was the first, and somebody asked where the head is. I said, just walk through the kitchen, past the rooster, and you'll see it. And what about that kitchen? Do you remember that kitchen? Tell us about the kitchen, Shane.
I think it's more like, well, there was a chopping block and a hatchet and a bowl. Was that pretty much the extent of the kitchen?
Yes.
Yeah. And what kind of flooring did they have?
I think Jesus made the floor.
There was an open fire. There were odds and ends of tools and other things collected. There was no roof over to the bathroom. And the toilets in Peru, you're lucky if you get a seat with the toilet, and you're super lucky if you have toilet paper. Now, the door was a little bit, like you say, rustic, because it was just a curtain. And when you just kind of shut it behind you. But I don't recall if there was a toilet seat.
There was a seat. It was a beautiful
seat. And then when you flushed it, it was like the rain gods had just gotten the call yesterday and they were planning for it. Then you take the curtain and you open that up and you walk right back out into like the 1200s in Europe. It's just a scene. You got an open fire and you got this rooster that's eyeing you up and down. You got that chopping block. You kind of wonder where all the food came from. There's a couple pots maybe, but with lids on them. The food came really fast, and locals were in there eating and real curious about us. And it's always a good sign to see locals in there. So clearly it passed all the OSHA inspections.
I think in terms of scale, that was a solid gold toilet too. For sure.
It was notable.
That was the nicest toilet in Peru.
Well, they blew their budget on the toilet, so.
Yeah.
What was your favorite town?
I think for me it was Huancayo. Do you remember that one? I think it was Huancayo. That was when we had the nice hotel, and I gave you my hotel room.
Huancavelica.
Thank you.
Huancavelica. That was a sweet.
That was my favorite town.
Sweet town. Little congested, and Garmin still needs to update which way a one-way is. And hell, the way we all ended up at the same place in town because we got split apart and one of the bikes quit. And every time the bikes came into this busy little town, everybody was just waving. This is where the other bikes went. Yes. And then we met this old lady across the street, trying to get to the front of that. It was right on the plaza. And it gets tricky in those little Latin American towns because they're all one ways. And sometimes you can't take traffic. Sometimes you can. And this lady, she just came over and goes, "Follow me." And I said, "But you can't go through there with the motorcycle." She looked me up and down. "You can." And she took us all the way there. And it was this, I don't know, colonial high vaulted ceiling affair that was really nice. And we hadn't seen foreigners for days, and we were not going to see one in that town.
Nope.
And that was the brilliance of that. It was, just daily life of a small indigenous town way up in the Andes, lost in time. If that was something, it was going on there, and everybody was friendly. Wow, what a scene that. Yeah, that was my favorite town as well.
Yeah, and that the ending of that day was pretty indicative of most of the ends of most of the days, because it was getting pretty close to dark. We didn't quite know where we were going. We had just gotten a flat tire. We got that sorted out, and then we got split up. And like you said, Phil, Patrick and Ed and I were the ones.
Russ, remember?
Oh, it was Russ.
The BMW had problems.
That's right. It wasn't a flat tire. It was just, it didn't like the altitude. but we got into town with just enough light to be comfortable, and it was awesome. And the people were like, "Yeah, your buddies went that way. You should go that way. That's where your buddies are going." And you didn't need any Spanish. You just need to look like this.
Yeah.
That was Patrick Verity talking about riding motorcycles in Peru and a few other things. If you want to learn more about Patrick or anything else we do at 10 Minute Travels, please visit 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.
And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.